Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. The town I grew up in is considered to be a fairly small town overall. It's basically made up of continuations of previous generations. And while they have recently gotten a Sonic's Drive-In and a Dollar General, it is still and forever will be a super small town in north-central Colorado. Most people think of Denver whenever you mention the area, but we're actually a solid hour and a half away. I spent most of my life in the arms of what was basically the middle of nowhere. But unlike the rest of my graduating class of like 30, I ended up moving out further west when I hit 20. So I know both sides of life, this tiny town that no one's heard of, and the big city out on the coast. What's weird, life in the small town is actually more terrifying in my opinion. Sure, living in Cali, you may get robbed or accosted by someone in some sort of substance, but at least you can expect it. For some reason, learning about the horrors of your hometown tends to blindside you, or at least it did me. I don't know. Maybe not all small towns have secrets that they hold on to like mine did, or maybe they do. My hometown actually had a few things that everyone knew about, but no one spoke about. Some of them happened in my grandparents' time, some in my parents', but they were some of the best kept secrets around, honestly. The main thing I learned was that I apparently had an aunt at one time. Back when I was about 15, my grandma accidentally slipped up and called me Nance. My name is certainly not Nance, Nancy, or any variation of it. I asked her who Nance was, and I remember that when I asked her, she looked like she was about to seriously burst into tears. She said that she couldn't tell me, but that I should ask my father about it, and I honestly had no idea who they were, nor did I expect what my dad told me. Apparently, Nancy, lovingly referred to as Nance by my grandma, was my aunt, my father's older sister. This took me by surprise, as I never knew that I had a paternal aunt. I thought my father was an only child, mostly because I had never seen a photo of this woman, never heard her name mentioned, and I had never spoken to her. Obviously, I was curious about who she was, where she was, and why she hadn't been around. And I wish that I had quelled that curiosity, because it was pretty horrible. I was informed that back when my father was 12 and my Aunt Nancy was 14, she had apparently gone missing. There was one night back then that she went out with her friends, and she just never came home. At first, my grandma thought it wasn't a big deal. She was just out there and being stupid. But then, by morning, it was apparent to her that something had gone wrong. He told me that my aunt was a straight A student and would have likely graduated valedictorian, but that night she seemingly vanished. This was obviously creepy to me. I had never expected to have an aunt that was a missing person. Then he told me that she wasn't a missing person. She was murdered. He went on to tell me that when she went missing, the whole town went into what was essentially a small town lockdown. They put a curfew into effect, and every adult was on the lookout for Nancy. They seriously combed every inch of the city and spoke to everyone they could to see if anyone had known of her whereabouts. They had spoken to the friends that my aunt had gone out with, and they all told the same story. They were out basically loitering wherever, and a police officer pulled up with his lights on. They said that the officer rolled down the window and then called out to Nancy, and she ran over to speak to the officer. Apparently, she then turned around, yelled that she needed to go, then got in the car, and that was it. The biggest issue with this is that not a single one of her friends had seen this face. None of them could describe him at all, and there was no details on the car that made it stand out, and none of them had gotten the plate. A year after she had disappeared, everyone had pretty much given up on ever finding her alive. When someone actually ended up finding what looked like a shallow grave in a creek bed that had preceded. The police came out and dug it up, and as you can probably guess, they found the body of my aunt. Based on how she was buried, they assumed that she was sexually assaulted and the cause of her death was strangulation. At this point, the only thing anyone knew was that the last person to see her alive was a police officer, but there was literally no information on who it was. Then he explained that, not long after they found her body, 2 police officers resigned from the force. One of them had a daughter of his own and was married, and the other was just the opposite, single and had no kids. The one with the family left town, no one has any idea where he went, and the other officer actually became the physical education teacher at a high school that I graduated from, and was also the football coach. I saw this man almost every day for 4 years, and every single day after this, I had to think that he may have seriously assaulted and murdered my aunt. The worst part, there's no way that we will ever know what actually happened to her, mostly because of how much damage had been done to her body over the year. There was no physical evidence, no DNA that they could find, no prints or anything like that. Just a dead girl and silent suspicions. Apparently, the entire town, for lack of a better word, knew that these 2 were involved. The timing was too suspicious, and it was apparently believed that their higher-ups may have been aware of the situation. But like I said, nothing ever happened to them. One is gone, and the other still teaches high school gym class. Honestly, it was just one more reason to get the hell out of there when I got the chance to do so. I grew up in a small local town. It's one of those that you just pass through on your way to your destination. Hell, most people probably wouldn't even stop there nowadays. If it's not for the lack of Wi-Fi, well, my parents still live there and they use some crappy local service that gets like 5 megabytes max, or the one hotel located there. It's nothing fancy too, and usually just the home of meth users and runaways. Then, it has to be the homely look of the rusty metal sidings and abandoned-looking farmhouses with a creepy child swing in the front yard that really drives people away. I was born and raised here in the 90s, and I was a kid, so I was really naive and didn't realize till I was older how some things were actually weird and creepy about our town. Growing up seemed normal. Both of my parents raised me in the home given to them by my paternal grandfather. I went to the public school there, and I made friends with the people in my class, as well as some older and younger ones, as I was an only child. Nothing was ever too weird at that time. My friends and I would ride our bikes to the fire station on occasion to get sodas from the machine there. But I do remember my parents always tell me to take a specific route to avoid that neighborhood. I always thought that the people were just mean or didn't like kids. I learned as I got older though, that block was just a bunch of run-down and condemned houses that meth users and squatters took over. There was always something illegal and dangerous going on, so they of course didn't want to take any chances. Fair enough reason for me. So, as if I was an autopilot, that road didn't exist and I always avoided it. Even now and then, I go to visit my parents. I don't dare to walk or drive that way. Now, some may call this good or bad, but because of how small our town was, everyone knew everyone, and everyone knew your business. That included this older lady that was called the neighborhood grandma. I called her Grandma Carol. She was always such a sweet and forgiving soul. She would make so many sweets during the holiday and bring them to church, and she'd pass them out to us kids on our way to the bus stop or at home. I remember her even bringing me a handmade scarf one year for Christmas and then having dinner with us. She didn't have any kids, and she was never married. She said that she could never find a man that could keep up with her, but she did have a dog. I believe it was a Boston Terrier, the small dog that always looked old and has a long mustache. His name was Prince, and she spoiled the hell out of him. He always had a different sweater in the winter that she made. I was so impressed by this that I actually went to her house once so she could teach me how to crochet. I still have the doll dresses she helped me make. Carol was also very giving to our town. She was a lunch lady for a while, but she ended up retiring. She was also very active in the tiny church there, as mentioned, by making sweets and other food items for parties and ceremonies. She also made what she called care packages, which included long-life food items like canned goods, boxed meals, juices, and etc., as well as small necessities like small travel bottles of soap and also Band-Aids. She always included a card with a different Bible passage on each one of them, and she would drive them over to the forbidden neighborhood and hand them out. I remember my dad saying that she was crazy for it because they could easily overpower her and kill her, but she didn't see it that way. She brought them food and water and treated them like everyone else, and they loved it. I remember one time, my mom actually went with her and was telling me a story that when they saw Carol, one guy put out his cigarette, dusted off his shirt and hands so he could hug her. He even helped pass out the gift baskets. My mom said she even got worried at one point because one of them said something inappropriate, and the guy helping had this raging look in his eyes, and he just smacked him on his head and told him to apologize to them. But Carol never had a concern being around them. She was always fine with them and even stayed and tried playing with the kids. Carol really made a difference to them, which made this whole situation even stranger. I was in middle school at this time. The school year was almost over, and next year, I would be going to high school. I was planning on going to Carol's when I got home because she agreed to help me make treats for our school graduation that was going to be that Friday. I got home, grabbed some of the ingredients that we had bought, so not to use up hers. I told my mom that I was going, and then I headed over to her place. When I got there, I noticed her gate was open. She had a beautiful front yard, and she loved gnomes, and they were all over the place in different poses, different sizes, and she was proud of it. But I also know that she always kept the gate closed because she would let Prince run around while she was working on her yard. So I found that strange, but still a kid, so the thought didn't stay long. I got up to the door and knocked and waited. As I looked around, when she didn't come to the door, I rang the doorbell. Maybe I was impatient, but I remember it feeling like I waited forever. And after a while, I tried the door and it was locked, so I carefully walked to the back to make sure that I didn't step on any flowers, and I noticed that the door was cracked open. I knew it wasn't okay to go into someone's house without permission, so I yelled for her. I called for her a few times and even called for Prince because he always came running to the door. Now, even as a kid, this seemed very off, and I started getting scared. So I left all the supplies sitting on her porch and I ran home to tell my mom. She thought maybe she was just in the bathroom or fell asleep and forgot to shut her door, so she called her. When she didn't answer, my mom and I drove back over there. She told me to stay in the front porch and she went around back. After several minutes, she came back to me with my supplies and told me that we needed to go home. Once home, I wasn't really told much, but I do remember her telling me to go to the kitchen to make my treats, and that's about when the police showed up. My mom went outside to talk to them and then they left. I found out after a while that Carol was missing. My mom tried not to scare me but at least tell me what was going on. She said that when she went in there, neither Carol nor Prince were anywhere to be found, and she wanted to make sure she was okay, so she called the police. Not only our home, but the entire town was affected by this. It wasn't the same. There were many rumors, some hateful comments, and some flat-out crazy conspiracies. This was over 20 years ago, and Carol still has not been found. As I got older, my parents explained to me more as to what happened, and I would get little bits of information from people still living there. My mom explained that when she went in, her TV was on, and the kitchen table still had a bowl of oatmeal sitting on it. Her medication was also sitting next to her breakfast, but hadn't been taken for that day. It was one of those weekly pill boxes. I remind you, we noticed this after I got out of school, so around 3 or 4, way past the time that she would have taken her meds and eaten breakfast. She said Prince's food bowl was either empty or knocked over, which that bowl is never empty, and her purse was sitting open on her bed. My mom knew pretty quickly something was wrong because she didn't leave the home without her purse either, and when she was home, it was always sitting on her kitchen table. The fact that it was in her bedroom and open was not right. I heard from a lot of people that the police couldn't find any evidence, such as a break-in, no blood, nothing else seemed disturbed, but they definitely felt there was a foul play. A lot of people accused the addicts, including my father, which is possible. Maybe someone was high and thought they could get money out of her or something. But I didn't feel the same way. She was the only person that didn't see them as less of a person. She tried helping them, and they seemed like they had a lot of respect for her too. I get that some people are unstable and unpredictable, but I think they were just as shooken up. But that didn't stop them from being harassed and interrogated, I heard. The only thing that ever happened that gave us hope, but also tore us down more, was a few years after her disappearance. My mom told me when I came home from high school that there was a group of women that got together to play bunco at night, and as one of them was leaving, she heard barking. When she finally saw where it was coming from, she noticed it was a small gray dog that looked malnourished and in need of a bath. She had brought the dog back inside the home when she started realizing he looked just like Prince. Surprisingly, she confirmed it when she called by his name and he responded. "Here's Carol's dog, alive, covered in dirt, oil and starving, but definitely alive." It had given us hope for a while that Carol may have been close and even alive. But then people fear that if Prince was alone, then that would mean that something bad has happened, as she would never leave him. It's still a mystery to our little town, but I had to move out after graduating. Not only did I need to relocate in order to get any kind of career, but that was all anyone ever talked about. I miss her. She was like a grandmother to me, but hearing about it day in and day out takes a toll on you. I hope we get closure one day, but I also don't want to hear they found her in any condition other than happily making blankets and cookies in seclusion. This isn't as much a small-town horror story as it is a middle-of-nowhere horror story, or a horror story that took place just past a small town. But I think it still qualifies because it occurred on our way out of a small town. A few years ago, around the summer of 2018, my girlfriend and I came into a bit of money, and we decided that we wanted to take a cross-country road trip. Basically, we would drive from Pittsburgh all the way to Las Vegas, spend a few days in Vegas, and then drive back. The trip in both directions was going to take around 32 hours total if we went straight across on I-70, and we would be tasked with driving from Pennsylvania, then to Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, Colorado, and Utah, before finally getting to Nevada, our final destination. We planned to do this over a few days, and we wanted to stop in a few states to get pictures and just kind of enjoy some of the Midwest. I know that a lot of people will say that the Midwest is boring, but if you think too hard on it, every state is boring. I think they all have their charm. So we plotted our whole route, decided on a few places to stop, and everything was going smoothly. And most of the trip was just straight driving, and we were making great time, and this event was really the only thing that stood out. There was one point where we had to stop to get gas, and my girlfriend said that she wanted to also stop and get something to eat. At this point, we were about 2/3 of the way through Kansas, and the next town was a small town called Ellis. Ellis is a bit to the west of Hayes, which is actually a decent-sized city for being in the literal middle of nowhere. But Ellis is pretty much the polar opposite small town vibe, with pretty much nothing to do or see. But it has its own rustic charm. We pulled into Ellis and got gas, when I saw a menu for a restaurant that I decided that we needed to try. It was a locally owned pizza and Mexican food combo, and I am a sucker for small town pizza. I grabbed the menu and got back out to where my girlfriend was finishing filling the tank, and I told her that we had to go. She agreed, and it sounded interesting if nothing else. So we left for the station, and we found the small building for this anomaly of a restaurant. Cutting the details about the food, it was seriously good. If you're ever in Ellis, check this place out. You'll find it. It's literally the only pizza and Mexican food place there. And the visit seemed to be fine for the most part. I was enjoying my lunch, and I thought that she was as well. Until I looked up and saw that she had a strange look on her face, kind of like she was a bit worried. I immediately asked her what was wrong, and she mentioned that there was a guy at a table at the other corner that was staring intently at us. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I looked back and sure enough, he was staring. He didn't even make an attempt to look away when I checked. He nodded at me, basically confirming that he knew that I saw him. I quickly looked back to my girlfriend and tried to play it off. Maybe he knew we were tourists and he didn't like the idea of outsiders. Maybe he thought she was pretty. Maybe he was just a very angry man by nature. She didn't really buy it, but my attention got pulled away from the situation when the waitress came to the table asking how we were doing. I told her that we were doing well, and then I started to tell her that we were actually from out of town and traveling across the country. As I mentioned this, I tried to pull my girlfriend into the conversation in hopes to get her mind off of the creep in the corner. It sort of worked. Then the waitress seemed excited to talk to us about our trip. We explained that we were from Pennsylvania and that we wanted to drive all the way to Vegas so that we could see the parts of the country that we otherwise wouldn't have. The conversation between us was all great, and she mentioned one or two other places that we should check out. She started talking about the one time that she had gone to Vegas when she was younger. Really, it was just friendly small talk. When we finished talking and she walked away to go do what she had to do, my girlfriend looked back and told me that the guy was gone. Honestly, that was a relief. I was thinking that we could stop worrying about him and that she would calm down and finish her lunch. I really thought that was going to be the end of the situation, that we would leave, get back on the highway, and continue driving for a few more hours before we checked into a hotel somewhere. Unfortunately, as fate would have it, that's not how things went, at least not right away. After lunch, we got back in the car and we hopped back into I-70 and then started out of the town. It was less than a couple miles down the way when we spotted what looked like a minivan stopped in the middle of the road long ways. It looked like they were in the middle of a U-turn on the highway and just stopped, or maybe their car had died. Either way, I slowed down as I approached, and I stopped the car a bit of a distance from the actual van. A couple car lengths at most. After a few seconds of just sitting there, I noticed that there were two guys sitting in the van, one in the driver's seat and one in the passenger seat, and they looked like they were discussing something or arguing. It was really hard to tell. Then after a few more moments, they looked back at us and get out of the car. That's when my girlfriend said, "That guy that just got out of the passenger side, that's the guy from the pizza place that kept staring at me." I thought maybe she was mistaken and maybe she was just being a bit paranoid because she was freaked out by the whole thing. But then the guy walked around the van, same flannel shirt, same blue baseball cap, same torn jeans as the weirdo from before. It was at that moment that it clicked what this was, or more so what it likely was. These guys were looking to do something aggressive towards us. Obviously, I didn't know the specifics, if they were going to rob us, steal our car, kidnap us, and etc. But it wasn't going to be good. Everything seemed to be incredibly still and silent for a few seconds, until I saw the pizza creep start to reach out for something. I have no idea what it was, but as soon as I saw him reach, I told her to get down and I floored it. I pushed the pedal as hard as I could, and while I may have been driving an early 2000s Honda, that thing jumped in speed quickly. I aimed the car straight for him and tore the shoulder, basically playing chicken with this guy. He was either to get out of the way and let us pass, or embarrassingly run over my tiny ass sedan. Thankfully for his sake, he jumped out of the way and I got past them on the shoulder. We kept going at max speed until I thought it was safe to slow down. Honestly, it was really weird, and I realize now how dumb it was to do what I did. If he had a gun, he would have shot me and killed me while I was driving toward him. If he hadn't moved, I would have murdered him with my car, and that would have been a whole other situation. Alternatively, they could have chased us, and let me tell you that Ellis is one of the last small towns that have an actual presence through Colorado. It was a solid 4 hours to Denver, which was the next metropolitan, and I'm assuming that these guys wouldn't have been keen on us letting us lead them on for 4 hours without ramming us off the road. As lovely of a city as Ellis was, and as good as the pizza was, I don't think we'll ever go back. On the way home, we actually took a different highway just to avoid that part of Kansas altogether. This actually didn't happen to me. It is a story that happened to my aunt back when she was in her mid-20s, and I'm going to say that it's an incredibly intense story, and this should definitely serve as a type of trigger warning. And like I said, she was in her mid-20s, and this happened back in the late 80s, a few years after I was born. Unfortunately, all of this had been told to me as I was just a baby when it happened, so I may miss some of the details, but I don't think it diminishes the overall story. This story happened while they were still married, but he is her ex-husband now, so I think it counts. My aunt and uncle met back when they were in high school, and they became a couple back when they were about 18. From there, they got married at the age of 22, and then were trying to have a kid, but come to find out, my uncle was sterile and they couldn't have kids. From what I've been told, this caused some problems between them, and they were on the edge of divorce, but they decided to go into counseling to try and fix it. From there, they supposedly got to a point where they were okay and things were essentially repaired. This was apparently not true at all. They were actually in a worse situation than before. Apparently, when they went to counseling, my aunt's husband started down the path of becoming super religious, and while there's nothing inherently wrong with being religious, he took it to a whole other level. He apparently became super controlling over my aunt and started making her go to church with him and start cutting the family out of her life. It hit the point where she told us that they were doing great together and that we didn't need to worry about her. But on the other side of that fence, he was abusive, controlling, and just genuinely doing whatever he could to ruin her life and make her miserable. She said that it started with him telling her that she needed to repent and beg forgiveness from Jesus. She said that she was okay with this and saw that maybe devotion to a higher power would be enough to keep them together. She started going to his church, she started praying nightly with him, and they started doing nightly Bible reads. Slowly, the controlling behavior started digging in. He started telling her what she could and could not eat. He started telling her that she wasn't allowed to leave without his permission. And after a while, he started controlling the music that she could listen to and what TV shows she could watch. Basically, anything that was violent, sexual, or had inappropriate language was banned from their house. Her husband literally hit a point where he was treating her like a child and running every single minute of her life. This would be bad enough, but things actually started getting worse with him. After he was at a point where controlling her wasn't enough, he started physically abusing her when she got out of line. All the while, he would be citing biblical scripture to her about things that were barely relevant. The big thing that happened between them actually happened about a year into all of this. My aunt had managed to get away from him for a little while. I had no idea how and spoke with a lawyer. She was able to get the paperwork started for them to get a divorce, and she brought it to him and told him that she wanted out of their relationship. While I commend her for being bold and standing up to him in this situation, it's not something that typically goes well with dealing with an abuser, and this did not go well. As soon as my aunt started talking about divorce, he started screaming at her about the sanctity of marriage and yelling about how her asking for a divorce was a literal slap in the face of Jesus. She told him that his abusive behavior was the exact opposite of what a true follower of his religion would have been doing. And then he went berserk. He went off on her, asking her how she could dare call him a blasphemer. And at that point he snapped. He started saying something about how she was possessed by Satan. He started telling her that the devil was using her to attack him, and that her inability to have a child, even though it was him that was sterile, was proof that she was nothing more than a puppet for the demons. He then grabbed a knife and then told her that he had no choice but to kill her in order to prove his love to Jesus. That night, that man stabbed my aunt 7 times. He used the kitchen knife and stabbed her over and over until he was sure that she was dead. Then he left her to bleed out. And fortunately, my aunt was way more of a fighter than he anticipated, and she had managed to actually survive the attack. She managed to knock the phone off the base that was in the kitchen, and she dialed 911, and by some modern medical miracle, she made it through. As for him, the cops actually arrested him in a church, apparently after he attempted to murder his wife with multiple stab wounds, and thinking that he had succeeded, he drove to the church that they attended, covered in blood, and asked the priest to say a prayer for him. Instead of sitting and praying with him, he called the cops. It's almost ironic that he tried to kill my aunt because Jesus wanted him to, and she survived. Then he went to a church, only for the religious figurehead to betray him and turn him into the police. It almost like attempted murder for your spouse isn't something that Jesus or really any deity would want you to do. And that's an absolutely crazy way to think. My aunt fully recovered. She does have some gnarly scars on her stomach and chest now. But I'm just grateful that she made it, and that this guy is in prison for the rest of his life. Maybe someone out there really was watching the situation and made sure that it went the way that it actually was supposed to. As a child, I was raised in a small tight-knit town. I hated it. Everyone knew you, and there was no such thing as a secret. If you tell one person, you will hear it from someone else in 2 days tops. I had a group of 4 or 5 friends max that I might share things with that I could actually trust. Hell, some things I couldn't even tell my little sister without getting something on her. Otherwise, we just use it as leverage on each other. And that's what makes the situation even crazier to me. Our school classes were pretty normal, in curriculum and in size in my opinion. We had maybe 10 or 15 of us in a classroom. No one outside of our town was interested in going to our school, and as soon as they were given the opportunity, kids in high school that had cars would get to choose to go to school outside of our district to get out of here, or people would move out before then. I was not so lucky. My family was far from wealthy, so we stayed in our town till I was old enough to move out. Anyways, back to the classes. Obviously, being a teenager, relationships are bound to happen. They weren't many to choose from, and some may have even been a year younger or older than you. I dated a few different girls there, but there was one I was with for about 2 years. For privacy reasons, I'll call her Macy. From the outside, Macy was a fun girl to be around. She was tall, about shoulder-length dark hair, and dark brown eyes with freckles. She could talk to anyone. She was definitely outgoing, and I never really saw a mean side to her. I think she would strive to be everyone's friend. She was just part of our group of friends for the longest time. She wore makeup and dressed more feminine, but also loved going down by the river with me and my friends to catch things, destroy things, and maybe enjoy some drinking. It was over the summer that I really got to know her more. I knew her dad was a drunk and her mom worked a lot, so she didn't see them much. She came over to our house a lot for dinner and sometimes even slept in our living room. There was one time that she had gotten into an argument with her father. He had grabbed her and started choking her when her mother finally convinced him to let her go, but her mother told her that it was best for her to leave for a while. She came over in tears and I helped her calm down, and I think that really solidified our relationship in a weird way. I was angry. My parents weren't perfect, but they would never hurt us kids. How could a parent do that to their own kid? It was worse when the cops showed up and did absolutely nothing. They showed up to their house, took him in. He said he was sorry and was able to come home after sobering up. Like that changed anything though. She practically lived with us at times. She slept on the couch. Sometimes she'd fall asleep in my room, and I'd sleep in the living room. We acted like a normal couple for the most part, hanging out with friends together, always walking to class together, things like that. But after a while, I started seeing a different side of her. I noticed some of the smallest things would set her off. If a friend teased her about something, like throwing a ball weird, and I didn't immediately defend her, she would be pissed. It started as her just ignoring me for the rest of the night. Then she would complain to me in private about how she was embarrassed. But then it started to become more public. She would call me out in front of our friends and even my parents and then storm off. This was my first real relationship, so I didn't really know how to react to it. I would go through the motions, apologize and make up, and we'd be fine. However, it always seemed to get worse. The more serious fights would happen when it was just us. She'd kick things, punch things, scream if she could, and sometimes she would even hit me. It was actually just punching me in the chest or smacking me in the face, but it was still unusual. I thought surely it had to do with her father being the person he was. Maybe this was what she did because she was used to it. So I would do what I could to calm her down, but it stopped working after a while. I would have to lock her out of my room or I would leave until she calmed down, but of course, that's when the accusations would fly. She would start getting loud and push me while at school, and it was embarrassing for me at that point, so I would just walk away. For some reason, when I did this, she thought that I was trying to hide from my other girlfriend. She started accusing me of cheating on her, and she'd always show up at the door of my classroom and wait to see if I walked out with another girl. We had a group project in one of my classes, and I was paired with my friend, Jeff, and some girl that I didn't know too well. And when I was leaving the room, she punched me in the face and started saying that she finally caught me. I remember the girl just looking horrified as she tried leaving without Macy noticing her. People were starting to gather, but she had her eyes locked on and jumped on the girl's back and started slamming her around. I managed to get her off of the girl and told her that we were done. I remember that I called her psycho or something equally hurtful because the look in her eyes changed to sorrow, and she ran off. I, of course, got called to the office and had to explain what happened. Macy ended up being expelled, and I told them it was my fault, hoping that the other girl didn't get any trouble. And I ended up being suspended for the quarter. I finished my suspension, and as awkward as it was, I returned to school to be the center of discussion for everyone. I didn't get to hear much on what happened to Macy, except for what my friends knew, which wasn't much, until I returned. I heard her parents were forced to put her in therapy, and possibly some kind of school for troubled teens, but I never saw her again. That happened about 18 years ago. Right after high school, I left that town. I wanted to go somewhere that was a lot more alive and meet people that I hadn't known my whole life. My sister and I even inspired our parents to get out of there a few years ago. However, they still surprise me with the amount of information, news, and gossip they tell me about people that live there. That's where it gets crazy. Around the time of our 10-year high school reunion, people started trying to contact me about getting together. I thought, why the hell not? And I decided to start making plans to visit. However, a few weeks after that, I got a frantic call from my mother late at night telling me that there had been a fire in our old town. She told me it was Macy's house, and the terrifying part, her parents died in the fire. My father was good friends with one of the cops there, and he had told them that Macy was still living there on and off, but she was working the night it happened, and they had to go pick her up. After the investigation, they had determined that her dad had passed out with a cigarette. He was blitzed, of course, and her mom had actually taken sleeping pills. It was just a bad situation, and I felt sorry for her. I almost wanted to reach out to her, maybe to at least give my condolences, but something told me not to. My mother went to the services, and she said Macy was just a shell. She just sat in the front pew staring straight ahead until the services ended. Afterwards, she said she was nowhere to be found, so my mother left her card with the other items and left. After that, I never heard about Macy or her life until last year. This time, my friend actually texted me and sent me a link to a local news for our old town. It started as a suspicious fire. Police were called to an old barn that was on fire behind one of the bars. Someone apparently walked out back, smelled the smoke, saw the flames between the trees that separated the property, and then called 911. After they put out the fire, they found a man's body in there. He had been stabbed multiple times, bludgeoned with a shovel, and doused in some kind of oil and set on fire. They couldn't ID the guy because he didn't have anything on him. That was crazy enough, right? Not at all. Not for that place. Rumors started flying pretty quickly. People started talking, but not to the police, but that didn't stop them from finding out. That's when my friend started filling in the blanks where the story left off. He still lives there. He actually took over his parents' drugstore, so he gets just as much information. The guy ended up being identified as the owner of the bar. They figured this out because his wallet was found in the dumpster at his bar, but his cash was missing. Coincidentally, someone showed up at a different bar, flaunting cash and buying everyone drinks, saying it was in this guy's honor. Thing is, they hadn't publicly announced this guy's identity, so the police took notice of this. The girl was picked up and questioned when she finally confessed to the murder. And you know where this is going. It was Macy. She was apparently dating the owner, or at least there was something going on between them. However, he was married. Rumors are that the wife found out and the owner tried to break it off with Macy, and she wasn't having it. And now that she is locked up for this, the rumors are coming back that she may have been involved in her parents' death. So, not only did I date a not-so-stable girl in high school, but she turned out to be a murderer. So I guess I got lucky at that time. But it does make me think what could have happened if I did reach out to her when her parents passed. What if we didn't move? Could I have been a victim? I also think if this was related to her childhood, and if that could have made a difference as well. One thing I told my friend though, is that he'll have to come to see me from now on, because I do not want to step back in that place. This story happened to me back when I was in college. I would have been around 21, I believe, which means that it would have been around 2010. And back then, I used to be a bit socially awkward. Okay, really socially awkward. And I lived on campus for most of my college career. Because I've always been a bit of a loner and a bit of awkward, I've never really been one to make a lot of friends. And until that point, I've only ever had one boyfriend in high school, and we just kind of decided to go our separate ways after dating for half a year. And when I say dating, I mean basically just talking in the hallways a lot. So yeah, you could say that I was a bit inexperienced when it came to boyfriends and relationships in general. Well, due to this lack of experience, I was a bit desperate, and the minute that a guy showed any interest in me, I kind of fell into it. In late 2009, around the end of August, when the fall semester started, I met a guy named Jack. And no, before anyone thinks it is, it's not his real name. Anyways, Jack was a bit of a quiet guy and seems like he didn't have many people that he would call friends. Basically, the exact kind of person that I was. Because of this, and because of the lab that we had to do with a partner, I ended up sitting by and subsequently getting to know Jack. I think the instructor saw that we were both loners and wanted to try and play matchmaker, which I really wish she hadn't. Jack and I became pretty good friends over the couple months that we worked together in that class, and there was some obvious chemistry between us. Then, on my birthday in January, he took me out to dinner and told me that he really had a crush on me and that he was wanting to ask me out. Long story short, we started dating. Of course, and again, I was inexperienced in the world of dating, and it pretty much felt the same to me, except we talked on the phone more and about deeper things. The relationship was going pretty well, honestly. We had our class together, we worked on various projects together, we studied for our exams, and while we were dating, I honestly was looking at Jack more of a best friend than a boyfriend. Obviously, I know now that it was likely that I didn't actually have feelings for him. But back then, I just kind of thought that this was what being in a relationship was for people in college. I mean, sure, others would go to parties, go drinking, clubbing or whatever, but that just wasn't who we were. We were the loner nerds, and I think I really just enjoyed having a fellow loner to talk to and spend time with. He treated me fine for the most part, and we rarely got into arguments, and I was happy. Obviously, this wouldn't be a story about a crazy ex if things didn't start to go sour, and they did start to go sour. We got together in January of 2010, and I think this all started around Valentine's Day. In fact, it was Valentine's Day that started to set this whole thing into motion. Something to note about me, I am a bit of a prude. I do not like my body, and I didn't like my body then, and I've just never really been into things that people think are sexy. This seemed like it wasn't that big of a deal to Jack, and we had never really even discussed sex in any way. Then, come Valentine's Day, I remember that he and I went out on a date, and it ended with us sitting in his car in the dorm parking lot. We were talking about how much we enjoyed dinner, how classes were going, and I think I was telling him about issues that my parents were having back home. And he handed me a box. My initial thought was chocolates, the stereotypical Valentine's gift. However, no, this was not chocolate. I opened it, and inside the box was a gently folded up nightgown that was mostly see-through. It was very clearly intended to be worn during, intimate moments. I recall that my face became beet red. I didn't expect this, and I didn't want it, and I really wasn't interested in what was being implied by him giving it to me. What's worse, despite my embarrassment and my clear look of mental anguish, Jack followed up with, "I have a bit of extra cash this month. How about you and I go to a hotel room tonight and see if you can try that on?" I think I honestly started to cry. Like, not tears of joy or sadness, just literal eyes watering from some strong level of embarrassment and disdain. I folded it back and placed it back in the box, then handed it to him. I told him that, as much as I really like him, and as much as I appreciate the thought, I was not ready for this relationship to go to the next level. I remember apologizing over and over again and just telling him that I was not ready. And after a few moments and heavy sighs, he turned to me and handed the box back. I was a bit upset, but he comforted me with, "Look, I'm not trying to pressure you. I really do love you and I want to be with you for the foreseeable future. So, what I want you to do, I want you to keep this, and then, when the day comes that you're ready, it'll be there. That way, I don't have to go through the awkward process of returning it, and we can still call it a gift. Is that okay?" And, of course, I accepted this proposal. I would keep it and then it would be there when I was ready. I told him that I didn't know when that would be, and he seemed genuinely okay with it. Everything about his statement, his behavior, and his attitude, all of it seemed genuine and I believed him. This was, unfortunately, where our relationship started to fall apart. We would spend time together and he would be super clingy, and then, by the end of the night, he would seem like he was super distant, like the night was great until it was over. Then, he would be upset. In hindsight, makes it super obvious why, but back then, it was just odd behavior for me. Anytime we would watch a movie that involved anything sexual, he would always get, well, let's just say, weird. Then, when nothing sexual happened between us, the next day he would be super pissed. I would ask him what was wrong, and he would always go off on me over literally nothing. He once yelled at me that I was awake too late after we had spent time together, because I posted a meme on Facebook about half an hour after he'd left. He seriously exploded because I shared a stupid meme after he'd left and told me that if he wasn't there at night, he wanted me in bed and asleep. That was actually one of the worst fights and where the already crumbling relationship seriously took a turn. After that night, when he would come over and be together, he would be super controlling, asking me where I was going every time I got up, asking who I was texting and who was texting me, and asking what I had done that day and scrutinizing every single thing that I said. Then, after he would leave, he would wait about 20 minutes and he would call me. I made the mistake of answering a couple times, and the times I answered, he actually yelled at me asking why the hell I was still awake. He would text me randomly throughout the day and ask me, more like demand, that I take a picture of myself and whatever was in front of me. So, to put it simply, he became ridiculously controlling and wanted to know every single detail about everything that I was doing. Again, this was my first relationship with an adult, the first time I had a boyfriend that I actually spent time with, and I had no idea what the hell I was doing or supposed to do. Then I actually had an event that gave me a bit of clarity. I was talking with my mother one day, literally talking to her about her going through a divorce with my father, and he texted me with a, "Hey, I want a pic of you." I think my tone changed and my mom noticed because she asked me what was wrong, and I broke down. Within a few seconds, I went from trying to comfort her to bawling my eyes out and telling her all about Jack and how he was ruining everything. I seriously just let it all come out. She straight out told me to dump him. She told me that she was unhappy in her marriage with my dad and that's why they were getting a divorce, and that she didn't want me to end up with someone that I didn't love or end up unhappy. At that point, it just kind of clicked. I had to break up with him for my sake, and I didn't want to end up in a loveless relationship with a man that controlled my every move. The next day when he came over, I told him that we needed to split up. He was, of course, furious. He started in with anger, then he started threatening to hurt himself, and then he started calling me every single awful word that he could think of. Obviously this hurt, but I let him finish it up, and then explained to him that I needed some time alone because of my parents getting a divorce and that the stress of my family breaking up was getting to me. Yes, this was a lie, but it was the best that I had. After I said that, he just kind of stood there, said that he was sorry, and then left. It was quite the amicable breakup that I was hoping for, but it was a breakup, and that's all that mattered. I honestly thought that it was over after that. Again, my naivety got the best of me. What I didn't expect was the barrage of calls and texts that followed. Jack would not leave me alone. It would be, "Hey, how are you?" in the morning, and then "You're such a stupid..." Well, I'm not going to finish what he said, but you can assume. This went on for a week, and then the "You don't know what you're missing out on" kind of text started, alongside pictures of his privates. This guy seriously went full on creepy in a matter of around 8 days. It's pretty bad when I could even figure out that he wanted to be with me for literally just one thing. This went on for a couple weeks until the final night and the final event between us took place. It happened on the night of my mother's and my brother's birthday. They actually share the same birthday, so we always make it a point to have a family dinner out wherever they choose. We were out enjoying ourselves and having a great time at dinner, when out of nowhere, Jack seriously walks into the restaurant. I saw him walk in, and I saw him tell the waiter that he was with our party. He walked right over to the table and put his hands on my shoulder and squeezed, and started to say hi to my mother with the fakest voice that I've ever heard. The tension at the table was immediate, and my mom had never seen him, but it was obvious who he was. What's worse, he had the audacity to angrily ask who the hell the guy at the table was with us. And I said it was my brother, and then said that he needed to leave. My brother asked me if he needed to take care of this guy. I told him no, and honestly, it was a disaster that ended up with my brother and Jack getting into a sort of shoving match, and the manager dragging Jack out of the restaurant in a half-assed chokehold. Thankfully, they let us stay when I explained that Jack was my ex and that he had walked in to cause problems. They could see that I was being honest and told us that they would make sure that he didn't try to come back. After we ate, and after the embarrassment had worn off, we walked outside to go our separate ways. We were standing by my mother's car and talking, and almost out of nowhere, a crappy black Corolla guns it through the lot straight at us. My brother noticed it and was able to yell, and we all got out of the way. Well, my mom's car wasn't so lucky, and as you can probably assume, this Corolla belonged to Jack, and he had just committed attempted murder with his vehicle. He then backed up and tried to go as hard as he could in the direction that I ran, smacking into another car. Then he pulled away and took off. If I may say, this all sucked. My mom's car was seriously damaged, another random person's car was hit, and the back end smashed in. And all of this was because of this jackass that I decided to date for a few months. We called the cops, we talked to the management so we could find the person that owned the car that got hit. This whole thing was a disaster. I explained to the police everything that I had gone through with this guy and told them all the things that he'd sent me, and they said that they would be on a lookout for him. But at this point, had to consider this as a hit and run. That night, my brother and I actually stayed at my mom's place. I was not going back somewhere where he would have access to me. And about an hour or two after we had gotten back to my mom's place, Jack actually called me. I was enraged, so I answered. I asked him what the hell was wrong with him, and probably had a few other choice words. This sick piece of shit seriously responded with, "I just want you to know that I have never been as aroused as I was when I tried to kill you." Seeing the terrified look on your face turned me on more than anything, and I can't wait to see that look on your face in class tomorrow. Then he hung up. Needless to say, I immediately called the police and informed them of what he had said. They updated the information and considered his "in class tomorrow" comment as a clear and present threat of danger, which apparently accusing someone of attempted vehicular homicide isn't. This story pretty much ends here, with Jack being arrested, expelled, and charged with several different things and thrown in prison for a few years. This was about 11 years ago. I know for a fact that he's out now, but thankfully he hasn't reached out to me or attempted to contact me in any way. I'm not going to lie, he is the one person that seriously scares the hell out of me. Mostly because he went from nice guy to attempted murderer within a couple of weeks because I wouldn't sleep with him. So Jack, the worst boyfriend that I have ever had, and the man I wish I would have never met in college, let's never meet again. And also, screw you for wrecking my mom's car like that. She seriously loved her Yaris and hasn't found one in that color blue since. So about 12 years ago, I was 9 years old, and I was home alone with my 12-year-old brother. We were supposed to go to my aunt's house to have lunch and wait for my mother there. We always did that because we were too young to stay home alone according to my mom. We got up at 10:30 a.m. I took a shower, then my brother, and after that, we were both in the bathroom brushing our teeth and finishing up, when we heard someone knocking on our door. Since every time someone knocked at our door, they turned out to be some salesman or Jehovah's Witness, and we kind of waited for them to go away. But after a couple of minutes, I went to see if they were still outside through the window, and no one was there. What a relief. We continued getting ready when we saw a shadow go by through the bathroom window, which was kind of like a small square made with that kind of glass that makes everything behind it really blurry. We waited and saw in case it was just a bird flying by, when a hand hit it, clear as day. We got scared. We didn't know what to do. My brother had his cell phone, so he immediately called the police. And while it was ringing, we heard a loud bang at the door. Someone was brute forcing it, and I don't know if they were kicking it or ramming it, but it was one of the most frightening things that I have ever heard. My brother told me to lock the bathroom door, so I did. It took 5 bangs so the perpetrator could finally bash open the door. Then the police answered. I remember the exact thing my brother said, and he was whimpering. His voice could barely be heard. "Hello? There's someone in our house. I think they're stealing." Then a pause. "We are at..." and he gave them our address. And then another pause. "I'm with my little brother. We're locked in our bathroom. Please, hurry." While all that, I was sitting against the wall hugging my knees. It was one of the most nerve-wracking experiences ever. I could hear the man going through all of our stuff, emptying the stands, going up and down the stairs, opening cabinets, and he even broke a few cups and plates. I don't know why. Then I heard the sound of my cell phone when it turns off, and I remembered that I left it on the kitchen table. I felt so stupid for leaving it there, and things continued for a couple of minutes when we heard him trying to open the door to the bathroom. My brother got a hold of a big metal rod that we had lying around there, and he started kicking the door. "Who is there?" the man screamed. We said nothing. Another kick, then another, and I felt like I was about to have an anxiety attack. My chest started to ache, and I had chills, and I was really hot. I tried to remain calm, but it was just too much for me. After that he had stopped, we heard the door opening, and then silence. We waited for almost 10 minutes before going out of the bathroom. The living room was a total mess, lots of papers and books on the floor, and the cabinets were wide open. The cups and plates were all on the floor. And in our mother's bedroom, the nightstand and the closet were open, and everything inside them was all over the place. Upstairs in our room, it was the same thing. In about 5 minutes, the man was able to go through everything we had and left a total mess. After that, my brother called my mom and she ordered us to go to my aunt's place ASAP, and so we did. When we got there, I was a little more relaxed. My aunt was waiting for us with ice cream, probably because my mom told her everything and she wanted us to calm down a bit. We went back home at about 5 p.m. and my mom told her boss that she had a home emergency, so she left early. She tidied up the house, cleaned up, and left everything the way it was before so we could be relaxed. I really appreciate her effort and my aunts to calm us down and do everything so we didn't have to think about it. According to my mom, the police got home after she arrived at around 3 p.m., 4 hours after the incident. She explained everything, but because of the lack of evidence, nothing could be done. The man was never caught, and honestly, I don't think they even tried to search for him. And the next days, my mom was home with us. Now, I tell you the story as a funny anecdote. Luckily, no one was hurt, and he only took useless stuff. But at that time, I was really scared. To a 9-year-old, an experience like that can have serious repercussions. I'm lucky that it never came to that, and I got over that after a couple of weeks. My dad and I were never close. I wasn't close to anyone from his side of the family, but his 2 younger brothers set off every internal alarm that I had. Uncle number 1 turned out to be molesting his stepdaughter who he raised since she was an infant. And uncle number 2 is who this post is about. I'll call him D. I have several siblings and we have many cousins living in our small town. They all think D is the best, lots of fun to be around, but I never warmed up to him. I didn't trust him and he had a creepy vibe. I kept my distance and my mom never made me hug or have physical contact with anyone that I was leery of. D lived next door to Grandma and seemed to always be down with some kind of illness. I was staying with Grandma for the day and he was making food for D because he was sick. She fixes him a plate and tells me to take it over. I'm not happy about it, but I know better than to disobey, so I take the food next door. I walk in the door and he yells out and says to bring it back there. I walked into his bedroom and I set the plate on the wardrobe by the foot of the bed. D says he can't reach it there and to put it on the nightstand next to the bed. I take it and I set it on the nightstand and D grabs my wrist. I panic and I pull away trying to get loose of him. He's pulling me towards him and I brace my foot against the nightstand and I resist and saying, "Let me go." He says, "I just want to talk to you." And I just say, "Let me go." I'm ready to leave that hand behind if necessary, and he finally lets go. I bolted out of the house, but I said nothing to Grandma. Later that evening, I tell my cousin, and she said that I'm stupid. He doesn't know why I'm the only kid that doesn't like him, and he just wanted to talk to me. That I should feel terrible about thinking that he was trying to pull me into his bed. What a terrible thing to say. I didn't mention it to anyone else and I began to question if I was wrong, and I reacted badly. I felt guilty for a long time, but I still stayed away from him. As I've gotten older and look back, I think my reaction was correct. What adult tries to get a kid to warm up to them by grabbing them and then pulling them toward the bed? What adult continues to do this when they can see the child is terrified? You get a child to warm up to you by terrifying them? No, adults with good intentions don't do these things. We were obedient children. If he would have said, "Wait, I want to talk to you," I would have obeyed. Dee passed several years ago, and there were rumors about inappropriate behavior with young girls, but nothing more than rumors. And I still believe that I read the situation right. This happened years ago when I was barely 14. My middle school and my best friend's middle school organized a trip abroad to Great Britain, London to be exact. It's supposed to be a few days looking at London attractions, the museums and the shops, and it was fun. Until it wasn't. For the day before we were supposed to leave and go home, we were brought to the streets with some interesting shops, and we received free time for shopping. And then, our teachers and guide had a brilliant idea. They told us after the time for shopping ends that we have to meet at a different street than this. In retrospect, it was like 100 meters away, but they still shouldn't do that. Most of us have never been in London, and we barely speak English. We don't have a map of a city, and roaming services don't work correctly. 90% of the students got lost, and I got lost with my best friend because we went in the complete opposite direction, and we were both confused about the directions given to us. We were walking along the pavement, and my friend was either running ahead or staying behind and nervously look around. We didn't look like we were together because we were not interacting with each other. So I guess that's why this happened. My friend ran ahead and stopped to look around when I saw a black car approach me and then match my speed. I started to feel like this was a scene from a movie. It was broad daylight, and there was a lot of people around and no one reacted. I was so confused and I didn't know what was happening. Then, from the car stepped a man and said, "You look nice. Come with me," and then tried to grab me. The car was still running, so I suppose someone was still in it. I was stunned. I couldn't believe this was real. And at that moment, my friend ran from behind me, grabbed me, and then dragged me away. We ran and tried to lose the tail of a man or a car following us. And after some time, we stopped, and my friend nervously cried, shaking me and screaming on why I didn't move when the man tried to catch me. I explained that it was like a deer in the headlights kind of moment. And we cooled down and then managed to ask someone for help. And then we found our teachers. We didn't tell anyone about what happened. We were not sure if anyone would believe us. And after that, when we got back, I told my parents about it, and I never went on a trip organized by my school again. My mom considered all of that really unprofessional and very irresponsible. Like every good story, there is a beginning and an ending. This roller coaster of a story is still ongoing 2 years later, with no end in sight. It all started when I wanted to further my education and get a bachelor's in information systems. To give a little about myself to help paint the picture, I'm 26, a 4'8" female, and I get called jailbait often because I look way younger. And during the beginning of my studies, my current boyfriend and I had broken up. So I told myself that it would be best to stay single until I finished school. And I took to the internet after my breakup, as most do, just looking for company. I had found this one group on Facebook where I felt like I belonged. I got along well with everyone, and I loved to flirt in this group. And that's where I met him. Let's call him Kemper. Like many others before him, I had latched my claws into him and began flirting. I even had a little crush on him. Things began innocently. I flirted, and he flirted back in the group. He seemed very mysterious though. I guess that's what drew me to him. He didn't have a profile picture, not of him at least, and he never told me his age or what he looked like. After a few weeks of flirting, a woman in the group that we were both in had mentioned that it was his birthday. I knew that I wanted to do something for him, but I was pretty limited on what I could do. Now, before I get hell for this, just know I have never ever sent unsolicited topless pictures to another man. Not until that day at least. On the pic, I wrote happy birthday, and then I insert his name, and I pressed the send button on the messenger. Just that split-second decision has changed my life the past 2 years. It's so easy looking back and thinking what you could have done differently, but there's no going back now. Within a week of talking non-stop to Kemper, he was already telling me that he loved me. He was working as a truck driver, but at that time he had broken his knee at work, so he was out of commission for a few months, which allowed him to talk to me as much as possible. During this time, I was working as a delivery driver with DoorDash, so it was easier for me to make my own schedule since I wasn't done with school yet. The first few months were great. We would talk constantly over the phone and through Messenger. And also, let me point out quickly that this was a long-distance relationship between Kemper and myself. So I remember the first fight that we ever had. Well, even before then, I could see the red flag slapping me in the face at every turn. However, our first fight was because I was texting him while driving. He flipped his lid and totally went crazy on me. It was very unexpected, and it made me cry, and I can't tell you how many times I tried to apologize and tell him that it wouldn't happen again. After the incident, I was blown away on how easily something so little, or at least I thought it was little, would make him do a complete 180. Months go by and the fights continue, more frequently. At one point, he had mentioned how cool it would be to have an app where we could see each other's location. In my naive and in-love state, I did some quick search and I found an app called Life 360. We both downloaded the app, and now he could see everywhere I go. At first, it was a neat idea to say the least, to follow him around everywhere he went, to feel closer and more connected to him. That's what I use it for. Well, he, however, wanted to use it for different reasons. And I learned over time how controlling, manipulative, and how damn right psychotic he was. He would argue about things, and even when I get mad, he would somehow turn things around on me and make me feel like I'm the bad guy. The first time we broke up, it was a shit show. He had broken up with me on the group we were both in, just because that I flirted with another guy and he didn't like it. He was telling the other guys in the group how much of a whore I was and how they could have me. He even threatened to give out my address to the guys in the group so they can come to my house and well, I'm sure you get the idea. My friend, let's call him Aussie for the sake of the story. He was a member of the group, and he could tell how upset I was in the group comments, and he messaged me personally for the first time. Now, let me tell you, I don't know what it is, but seems like I attract monsters. Monster is the best way to describe Kemper and Aussie. They were both well-off men with the world at their fingertips. I guess that's part of the controlling bits, or showing aggression when they don't get their way about things. Before I go into more detail about Aussie, I just want to recount a few incidents with Kemper to give the readers a better understanding of what kind of a man he is and how dumb I am letting things to continue the way they have. One incident happened months ago. He and I were fighting, seemingly over nothing, and I was driving home from a long day of work and school, and Kemper just blurts out, "I wish you would just run off the road and into a ditch and die." I was speechless. The tears welled up in my eyes, and the driving became harder because I couldn't see. So, he almost got his wish. I had to stop at a Dollar General in my town to compose myself. I couldn't breathe. I was wheezing. The man I had thought I loved was wishing that I would die. If he hated me that much, why is he keeping me around then? I just wanted to curl into a ball at the moment and just disappear for a while. I didn't want to go home, but I couldn't just stay parked at Dollar General. I was really at a loss for what to do. And it wasn't until a while later where I told my mom and dad what he said. They were already getting their pitchforks ready, wanting to reenact the Salem witch trials because of him. And ever since then, they haven't liked him. Another incident, he and I were talking about meeting, and he told me that we would need the Menopause Act in place. Yeah, he made that up, but basically, he doesn't want to have sex in the off chance that we get pregnant. He told me that if I ever did get pregnant, he would make me have a maternity test to see if it's his, and then he would make me abort the child. He doesn't want kids, but I do, so of course I was really upset, and he made me cry yet again. Making me cry is a common occurrence with him for over the last 2 years. One night, another fight breaks out and he loves to drink beer. He loves to hurt me even more by saying that beer is his best friend and beer would never disappoint him like I do. During this late-night phone call, he was extremely drunk and he was threatening to kill himself. I just couldn't take the arguing, so I bid him a good evening and let that be that I hung up on him. I received a large number of texts saying all sorts of things, but one really stood out. He wrote, "If I kill myself tonight, it will be because you made me do it." I didn't see this until the next morning, but you can imagine how panicked I was. My heart just sank, and of course, tears. He was good at making me feel like crap, good at manipulating, lying, controlling. It's just all becoming way too much, and it's really more than anyone should deal with no matter how much you love someone. And the next day, I begged him to get help for his drinking, his depression, and his suicidal behavior. But he just refuses. Being so far away, there's only so much that I can do. Kemper has anger issues along with so many other issues as well. I know I'm not perfect, but at least I don't act like he does. I'm very friendly and I get along with almost everyone. I guess that's part of his problem with me. We are complete opposites when it comes to that, and during our time together, I had gotten 2 other jobs at different times beside the DoorDash gig, and just part-time though. Notice that I said I had gotten 2 jobs? Well, the first one was at Walgreens. The very first day on the job, I was doing certifications for the job, and during the whole time, he was blowing up my phone, telling me that I don't need another job, or telling me that I won't have time for him, or that he would need to find someone else to replace the time that I had spent with him while also keeping me around. I just couldn't take it, so I quit. Fast forward a few months later, I get another job, and this one was at a Dollar General just at the town over. I did work there more than a day, but his bitching and nagging ultimately made me quit that job as well. I just recently had a talk with him about graduating soon and how I will find a job at a hospital working normal hours with better pay. Well, he didn't like that too much. He found some reason to be mad at me and start a fight, and he has gotten in the habit of ignoring me for a day or two. He's even ignored me for a whole week now, and honestly, that was the most peace that I had gotten in a long time. Things have just drastically gone downhill and quick. He tells me all the time now how he doesn't trust me because I wanted to go on a date with a cop. This was some guy that I had met at a gas station down from where I lived and gave him my Snapchat. He seemed nice and I was curious what kind of pics he would post on Snapchat or pics that he would send me. When the cop sent a dick pic, that's when he was blocked. And yes, I told Kemper about this. This incident with a cop had happened on one of many times that Kemper and I have broken up. I do respect him, as weird as that is to say. I would never go on another date with another man or flirt with another guy, but I'm very friendly, and I guess some guys just take that the wrong way. Now, Kemper tells me all the time that I need to build trust because the incident with the cop has caused him to have trust issues. I even had a work colleague, yes, a guy, that works at a Mexican restaurant, offer free food. And boy, do I love me some Mexican food. I see this guy quite frequently, and I talk to him when I see him because I pick up the DoorDash orders from where he works. This guy has asked me out quite often, but I turn him down every time. So he asked me if I would like free Mexican food and we could just hang out at the restaurant and eat and talk as friends. I guess I really am naive because I learned later on that this guy had a crush on me. How did I find out that he had a crush on me, you ask? Well, I was talking to him one day, maybe about a week after he offered me free food and just to hang. And he began to get extremely close to me, and then he kissed me on the lips at the restaurant where customers were sitting around and eating. I jerked my head back and told him how inappropriate that was and reminded him that I did in fact have a boyfriend, which he knew from the very beginning. I just don't understand, Ben. I know how bad it seems, and you're probably thinking that Kemper has every right to have trust issues, but I respect him in every way possible. And every time a certain situation like this happens, I handle it the best way that I know how, and I didn't want to make a scene with a waiter at the Mexican restaurant that kissed me. Now, in each fight Kemper and I have, he always tells me how much of a whore I am, or asks if I do OnlyFans, and he even told me the reason why I deleted Life 360 is because I'm going off at night with other men and eating their buttholes. His words, not mine. But no, the reason why I deleted the Life 360 app is because I needed to gain some of the control back and some of my privacy back. As of right now, Kemper and I will have the chance to meet this coming January 2023. Although, I'm really not sure about it. 2 years of ups and downs and him having my heart and ripping it out with its convenience for him has me thinking that it may not be the best idea. Also, it may be the fact that he has told me of his violent past with an ex-girlfriend of his. This happened many years ago, but it scares me knowing that he can be this violent. What had happened was, his girlfriend at the time was putting on makeup. He hates makeup, and they got into an altercation with him blacking out and him pinning her down to the bed and choking her. He didn't even realize what he was doing until he came to. He's told me lately that if he ever caught me in bed with another man, he would punch me in the face. Not the guy, simply because the man didn't know better, and I did. I spent a lot of time and effort into this relationship, wanting it to work out in the end, but honestly, I'm not sure if meeting would be the best thing to do, now or ever. So, let's talk about Aussie. He's a tad bit older than me. He's 49 years old, while Kemper is 48 years old. You would think they would be mature enough for their age. Well, Aussie is very mature. Kemper, not so much. Aussie and I began talking the first time Kemper and I had broken up. He was being a concerned friend and messaged me asking me what was going on. I spilled everything to him. He was like a best friend that I didn't know I had. He was so easy to talk to, and he even began opening up to me about his troubled upbringing. We would talk about everything, and things began to escalate into a more sexual topic. He would tell me about his dark fantasies, which at one point I would have shared with him, but not so much anymore. I'm more vanilla nowadays when it comes to stuff like that. And after a month or so of talking, he too would begin to tell me he loved me, but only as a friend. I knew better than that, and it made me uncomfortable knowing that someone that I've only had a handful of conversations with, which mostly consisted of sex talk, would tell me that he loved me. Majority of the time, he would just exchange gifs with a few voice clips shared between us. Over time, I felt bad for talking to this man, but he was a comfort when Kemper and I had broken up. But our conversations went from semi-normal to just weird. Let me mention real quick, just like Kemper, he too didn't have a profile pic, but he would post pictures of himself on the group. So I knew what he looked like, and he was a very handsome man. After a while of talking to him, he would send me some other pictures which seemed to be newer pictures, which looked nothing like the pictures that he had posted in the group. I didn't make a fuss out of it, just assume that pictures in the group were older pictures. One day he had told me that he was getting a haircut. I was trying to be polite and ask for a picture to see the new haircut. And days later, he finally sent me that picture. But I wasn't sure who this person in the picture was. It looked absolutely nothing like the previous pictures he had sent me. And at that moment, I assumed that I was being catfished, but it didn't matter to me because looks really don't matter. A lot of the messages I receive from him is how he wants to breed me, or he refers to himself as Mr. Wolf and tells me all the time how he wants to marry me and steal me away from Kemper and just get me pregnant. He talks all the time about how he would make a beautiful child and how he's very well off, so he would be able to have more children, and how much of a great life we would have. He even goes out of his way to find gifs and pictures of naked pregnant women being forced into brutal things. Things tend to get even darker at times. He has told me that he wants to have his way with me in front of Kemper, while he is tied to a chair, and then have his way with Kemper next. One time, he was talking about some women in the Facebook group we were in, and just women in general who would cheat on their husband and flirt with other men behind their husband's back. He would say how these women need to be taken care of. Well, not the exact word he used, but I hope you get where I'm going with that. He tells me all the time how he knows high-end people, how he's good friends with a governor, and that he can find any kind of information about someone if he needs to. It's truly scary to say the least if this is all true, and my gut feeling is telling me that it is, and it's just one of the many reasons that I began distancing myself from him. He's in the process of having a lawsuit settled, in which he would gain a large amount of money from it, which he really doesn't need. One day, he began sending me pictures of this piece of property with a large multi-million-dollar home with a cellar. He would tell me how he would convert the cellar into a dungeon and keep me there as his play toy. The more I write about things, the more I'm getting a better idea of how dangerous things can possibly be if I've ever met with either Kemper or Aussie. Aussie tells me all the time about his lawsuit and when it should be finished, and tells me how he would love to take my mom and myself to dinner. I talk about my mom quite often to him because she plays a big part in my life, and I love her more than anything. So, I live in the south by the Gulf, and Aussie has friends over in this area. He wants to meet a few of his Facebook friends that live in this area, and he had asked me to join him for a few weeks of traveling to meet some of his friends with him. And that is after his lawsuit is settled. That's a big nope from me. I barely even know him, much less his Facebook friends. So, this is my story so far. I'm not sure how things will turn out, but as of right now, let's not meet. Kemper and Aussie both scare me in ways that I can't explain. I do love Kemper with all of my heart, but he has a lot of issues that he needs to work on before I even consider meeting him, so it may never happen. I'm really hoping once I get a job working at a hospital that I will be able to find someone normal to date and spend the rest of my life with. Kemper tells me that sometimes I need to move on because he would never change, and I'm beginning to believe it. At the moment, I feel like things with Kemper will never go any further than how they are right now. It's hard though to get away from them, especially Kemper. He knows my address, my phone number, my email address, and he can even make multiple Facebook accounts to send me messages. Even one time, I had blocked Kemper on everything. He found a way to send me a message from an unknown number asking me to unblock him so we can talk. I have other stories that I can tell you about men that I never want to meet again. But this story is the one that has the most effect on my mental health. This is gonna be a long one, so I apologize in advance, but the background details are necessary for the story. I, a 23-year-old female, was recently in Africa on vacation with my family, and we stayed 2 nights at a desert camp in the Sahara. The first night, my sister and I were talking and hanging out with the guys who worked there, who were all probably around age 20 to 35. It seemed that they were just friendly and harmless. I noticed at the campfire that night that one of the guys started paying more attention to me, and I felt a little uncomfortable, but I figured that it was just a language barrier or something. So out in the desert, you can see the stars really well and even the Milky Way on clear nights, but you have to wait for the moon to go down, which is around 2 a.m. I guess it's a normal thing for the guys to come around to the tents, which are luxury tents, furnished with beds, lights, and a toilet and a shower, as well as a lock on the doors. So, not really normal camping. They knock on the door to see if you're awake and want to come out and look at the stars. My sister and I were sharing a tent, and my parents in a separate one across the walkway. The first night around midnight, I told my sister that I was too tired to go out because I was falling asleep, so she left to look at the stars without me. And I didn't lock the door because I didn't want her to get locked out if I fell asleep. Fast forward about an hour, and I'm on my side asleep when I wake up suddenly to see a head peeking in from the tent door. I thought it was my sister, so I groggily asked her, "What the hell are you doing?" because it was just weird the way that she was standing there. I start to wake up more, and I realize that it's this freaking guy from the campfire's head peeking in my room while I'm asleep. Now, I know it could have been a simple misunderstanding, but I felt totally violated with my privacy, especially because we were on their territory in the middle of the freaking desert. Like, I'm not kidding, we had to take a 30-minute truck ride into the dunes. I was in a fight or flight at that moment. He literally woke me up with a panic attack, and I started to have the nervous shit. So, I went to the door and told him that I was tired, and he kept trying to get me to come out to the dunes with a blanket. But I just kept saying no, that I didn't feel good and I was tired. At this moment, I don't know where my sister is, and I don't know where my family is. I'm very disoriented, and all I know is that this man is standing in front of me and was literally just watching me sleep. I don't know how long he was there for. It could have been a literal second, or it could have been 2 minutes. But either way, I was high-key horrified. I told him no again, and I said I'd go look at the stars tomorrow night. He told me that he wouldn't be at camp the next night, and that's why he wanted to go out tonight. But I wouldn't budge. And once he realized that I wasn't going to come outside, he asked me if he could have my number, and I told him no, and that I have a boyfriend. I really don't, but it seemed that was the only way that this man would respect my disinterest, by knowing that there was another man in the picture. After I said that, he asked me for my first name, and I gave it to him because I thought it wouldn't do any harm. I then said goodnight and locked the door this time. I went right to the bathroom and had diarrhea, and while I was on the toilet, I heard him come back and start calling my name from outside of the tent. But I just stayed quiet and I didn't say anything. I finished in the bathroom and I lay down in my bed, still trying to calm down from what had just happened because my heart was racing. I heard him come back again calling my name, and I laid in bed as still as I could, and I didn't say anything. I tried texting my dad, but he was not answering, and I didn't feel comfortable leaving the tent. Finally, my sister came back and my dad was with her, so I told him what just happened and they were confused and thought that it was weird. And that was kind of it. The next day I brought it up at the breakfast again, and my sister and dad basically told me that I was being dramatic and that I should just stop talking about it already because it wasn't that big of a deal. My mom was the only one who was like, "Yeah, that's not okay at all." And the second night, my sister and I were both out under the stars, talking to the guys and relaxing. Keep in mind, it's very, very dark and you can't see any faces, so I was having a normal conversation with this one guy, and all was well. But after a while he asked me if I remember him, and I'm like, "Well, no, I can't see you." And he's like, "Oh, then shine a light." And so I do. And wouldn't you guess, it's the same weirdo from my tent. I especially wasn't expecting him to be the dude in front of me because he had told me that he wouldn't be there that night, which leads me to believe that he picked up a shift just to see me. But I can't be too sure. But surprisingly, he was fine that night and respected my boundaries, so I didn't say anything to the guys who ran the camp. I was planning on doing so if he did anything remotely uncomfortable, but he didn't. The next morning we left the area, and a few days later, I started getting message requests on Instagram. Would you believe this freaking weirdo found me? I tagged the whole entire desert, and like you're telling me he found me based on my name and location. Not even a specific location, an entire desert. And my name isn't unique either. Well, anyway, he messages me, and although I'm creeped out, I'm also thinking, okay, well, Now he's harmless. Might as well see what he says. And he says, which is a direct quote, "You know, I'm really so happy to find your account. I was looking all the time." Which I found highly creepy to even say to someone. But again, it could have been just a cultural difference. But who knows? I didn't answer, and he messaged me again a few days later asking how I am, but I didn't answer. So yeah, I'm curious what you guys think about this, and if I was really overreacting, or if you think that my gut feeling was right. He seemed to be harmless in the end, but you never know. When I was in 6th grade, I often went to the park after school to play. It was always fun. But one summer's day, something weird and unforgettable happened. I saw a woman who looked just like me. She was an office worker, and she was clearly a lot older than me. But nonetheless, all of my friends said that she looked just like me. It was like she was the grown-up version of me. I remember that as soon as my friends laid eyes on her, they started shouting, "Hey, she looks like you." We were always noisy. I mean, that wasn't anything out of the ordinary. I guess that we were a rowdy bunch back then. Usually, when we were being loud, any adults or teenagers passing by would either tut at us or ignore us. But not that office worker who looked like me. She just stood there and stared at me and my friends. It was creepy, and once me and my friends had quieted down a little, we just kind of stared at the office worker, and we were stuck in a silent standoff. I started to get a little worried, and I didn't look away from the office worker, but I think that my friends were feeling the same as I was. I started to wonder if the person who was staring at us had some kind of sinister intentions. However, just as I was reaching the height of my concerns, the office worker stopped staring, and I chose that moment to look back at my friends just to see their expressions. And by the time that I looked back at the office worker, she was gone. After she went away, my friends and I slowly began to relax, and we got to a point where we were able to joke about the situation. They were making fun of me for having a creepy doppelganger. It was all fun and games that day, but when I thought about it later that night, there was something a bit less funny and a bit more disturbing about that experience. It was a weird day, and one I thought about for a while after. Fast forward to when I was 22 years old, I had a strange dream at that age. I was living in a city miles away from my hometown, but in the dream I had, I was alone in the same park that I used to play in as a kid. I felt very nostalgic to be back and somewhat lonely. I looked ahead into the park. It was a bright sunny day, and all the playground equipment looked nice and new, just like it did when I was a kid. I saw myself as a child playing in that park. I was with my friends, and I was laughing as my friends were pointing and screaming about someone who looked just like me. I just stood there like a statue staring, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I guess that I wasn't aware that I was dreaming. Suddenly, I felt an intense feeling that I wanted to leave. I felt as if I didn't belong there. I just needed to go. I wanted to go home. I felt a sense of fear which I can only describe as being lost. It was a very strange emotion to experience. I just wanted to go home, so I turned to leave. That's the last thing I remember before waking up. I expected to wake up at home, but I didn't. I woke up in a hospital bed. I had no idea how I got here. I was told that I had gotten into an accident while I was on my way to work. I used to ride to work on my motorbike. I have no idea who hit me, but I'm sure that they never got into any trouble with the authorities. It was a hit and run, and it turned out that I had just come out of a coma. Apparently, I was walking the tightrope between life and death, and if my life had been a candle, it would have been flickering. A few days after I regained my consciousness, I was finally discharged from the hospital. I left with worry in my heart, and I couldn't forget about the dream that I had before I woke up. I saw what I saw when I was in the 6th grade, and then again in a dream at age 22. I found that the clothes that I was wearing when I had my accident, I was wearing business clothes under my leathers. I saw my future self that day when I was younger. I am certain of that. I'm not sure why or how, but I know what I saw. Perhaps the reason that I am still here, the reason why I was able to wake up, was because of that interaction with what I thought at that time was a doppelganger. When I saw myself in the park as an adult, and I remembered the interaction, perhaps that was the trigger that I needed to wake up from my coma dream. It was absolutely unexplainable, but I count each day as a blessing. What was that? A glitch? Was I saved for some reason? Whatever it is beyond my comprehension, but I am grateful. I have been clean from all drugs since 2019. It took me a while to write this, and I never thought that I would be posting because of how stupid I was and the stupid mistakes that I made. I know I will get a lot of duh comments on here, so just don't even say it. I already know. I am telling this story to remind people that everyone's intentions are not what they say they are. I am mentally traumatized from this experience, and I get reminders of it every day. I am grateful to be alive, and I have no idea what would have happened if I didn't get away when I did. So just save the rude and cruel comments. Thanks. This story is based in September of 2017. I believe it was such a freaking blur. I did whatever I could to survive in this harsh world, so please no judgment. I was on the streets with no family, an inactive crack, and soon to be meth addiction. Backstory: I started using crack in 2015, and I figured out that if I sold my body, I could make easy money. I know, not ideal, but I was deep in addiction, and at that point, I didn't care about anything. But in January of 2017, I met Ty, who also smoked crack but worked every day, so I no longer had to do that. I was going on like 8 months free from selling my body and soul. And also, when I met Ty, he had a place in this big city and he did a lot of work for people in the city. I was left on the street by the man that I thought I had loved at that time. I must have said something wrong because he flipped out and left with everything I owned in his truck. We spent days getting high, and I was sure he was just throwing a fit, so I went over to a friend's house. Let's call him S. It was my home away from home, and I felt safe there. S was older, maybe a 60-year-old man who liked to get high, and over time, he became one of my best friends. I was able to take a shower and then put on clean clothes. And when I was all done, I remember sitting on the couch with disbelief that Ty would just leave me like that. I started crying and wishing things had been different, while S held me and comforted me. I knew deep down that I needed a fresh start, to depend on myself and live a happy life. And across the street from S's house was a hometown bar where rappers and musicians would perform. And on that particular night in the bar, it had been filled with people from the bigger city about half an hour away. Let me explain. Where I come from, there isn't really a place for addicts to go and get clean. They do have a women's shelter, which I had been to before. About 30 minutes away is a bigger city where they have all the help you can ask for if you are willing to do the work. At this point, I was ready to get away from everything and everyone. I had no hope of cleaning up my life if I stayed anywhere close to where I was using. Remember, you have to remove old playmates, playthings, and playgrounds. So that's what I needed to do. I went right over to the bar and found a semi-good-looking guy heading back to the city that I needed to go. I told him that I had planned to go to the shelter in the morning, and he told me that I could just go with him and he will take me in the morning. On the ride, I remember feeling like a whole 100 bricks was lifted off my shoulders. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a phone with no minutes. I asked the guy I was with that was driving. He had a pretty sweet ride, by the way. I said, "You don't mess with this, right?" And I pulled out my crack pipe. He shook his head, so I rolled down the window and just let it go. I knew that going into the shelter, I had to get better, not just for me, but I had kids and a family that at that time still hoped that I would get better. I wanted to start over. I just didn't know how hard it was gonna be. Me and this random dude go to his friend's house and we smoke a blunt, and I don't remember nothing after that. I woke up on the floor of a clean room, and I mean clean, like there was nothing in it. It smelled like paint as I looked around, and I realized this was the place the dude was talking about moving into and renting. And I got up, and he took me to get coffee and ride over to the shelter. I was freaking terrified of what I was walking into. I had no idea what to expect, and all I knew was that I needed to get better for my life, and I needed to do it now. As we drove into downtown, I got a little nervous because I knew downtown was full of crime and drug dealers, big buildings and confusing signs, tons of people and traffic, and then I realized that I was going to have to work really hard to get my life back. We pulled onto the street, and before I knew it, he was dropping me off. And there I was, standing in this big, beautiful, clean lobby, just feeling lost and broken. I had been with Ty for almost 7 months, and this was the first time that he left me like this, so I was kinda hurt over that. I knew he had been seeing someone else in our recent month breakup, and he wasn't afraid to show it. The place, it smelled like lime, with spotless white walls. I walked up to the desk, and I was asked if I was homeless. "Yes," I said, and she didn't even ask any questions. She just looked at me with sad eyes and said, "Okay, hun, let's get you set up." She took me to a small room full of boxes, and she hands me one. She explained that it was for my personal things, toilets and etc. I looked at her with unsettling eyes, and I replied that I didn't have any belongings, that I had lost everything the night before. And the nice lady gave me some toiletries and a pair of leggings. Next was the intake where I had to answer a bunch of questions, and I was handed a paper with all the rules on it, and on top of the paper, it stated that there was no Wi-Fi in or around the building. You had to go down to the stop sign to get internet. My phone was off, but I could still use Wi-Fi, but at that time, I wasn't really worried about it. I knew Ty was already probably staying with that other girl. Michelle was her name, so I didn't feel it was necessary to even try to use my phone. I decided to cut off everyone and try to be different. When she was done giving me the rundown on how things worked, she took me into the day room. Walking from the lobby was weird, and I remember feeling sick going through the double doors with stairs off to the left. Under the stairs was a pile of mats, and I was told to grab one. I followed her through another set of double doors into the day room, which was huge, and it was filled with at least 50 females. A lot of older ladies with nowhere to go, but it was loud and bright. The wall to my left was full of lockers, which I was told that I would get one if I stayed there long enough, and in front of that wall was about 10 to 15 round tables set up where most of the girls were sitting playing cards, coloring, and talking. On the other side of the room was the shower or bathroom, and a small TV that sat on a cart with wheels on it, and next to the cart was an end table that had an electrical strip full of chargers and phones. In the far back right corner was a door that led outside to go smoke. It was nice. There was picnic tables and lawn chairs set up with a huge fence in the yard for the kids to play in. And when 7 p.m. hit, the whole dynamic of the room changed. Everyone was moving around, people were running in, and then you would hear it over the speaker. "Roll call!" Then we were instructed to go and get one mat to sleep on. They passed out the blankets and pillows to those who were without, and they let us keep the TV on. The first night was scary and lonely. Here I was in a strange place, not even 2 full days clean off of a week-long crack binge. I was up half of the night with my head just racing. I finally fell asleep when the other girls started to get quiet. The morning came way too fast, and the rule was you had to get up at 7 a.m. You didn't have to leave, but you had to get up. A lot of older ladies didn't even leave the shelter. They knew they had a place to stay and had nothing else to do all day, so they hung out together at the shelter all day long. I had to go upstairs for breakfast, which was okay. I'm not really a breakfast person, but that morning I was starving, and I had the whole deal: eggs, bacon, and milk. And after breakfast, I went out to smoke, and I noticed this tiny black girl with cornrows in her hair had some cards in her back pocket. I had been playing cards since I was a kid. My dad taught me a few games, and I played with friends, and I also had done some time in jail in the past. I was lonely, and I didn't know where anything was, and it was obvious that I needed help. I asked her name and if she wanted to play cards, and after 2 games, we had a connection. She was cool, and she liked me, so I was okay with that. I can be awkward around new people, and females tend to not like me, so I find it hard sometimes to make friends. She asked me after we played a few more games of Rummy if I wanted to go to McDonald's with her. I was cool with that because I needed to learn the area anyway. On the walk there, as we were talking, something caught my eye, so I looked up and there he was. It was Ty. With all of my belongings in his truck, he drives right by us. I tried to call, but he ignored me every time. Guess he was done with me for good this time. That really crushed me. I wanted to fall to the ground and just sink till I disappeared, but instead, I had about 10 different emotions running through my body all at once. I was so angry that he was just looking for a reason to leave me since the month before when we broke up, and I stayed with my dad for a while. He started seeing this Michelle, and I was absolutely devastated. We continued our walk to McDonald's as I was silent and broken. That night was easier to sleep because I was exhausted from not having any sleep and just feeling done. I slept like a baby, to be honest. The next day, Mish wanted to show me this place where she goes to get good free lunch, and the only thing was, it was a church, and we had to sit through a 30-minute sermon, which was cool with me. We were standing outside waiting on the church to open their doors. and this blacked-out Mercedes with a trailer hauling a badass Harley pulled up and parked in front of the church. I then heard my loud mouth say, "Damn, that's a nice freaking setup." I looked at Mish and then looked back at the Harley. That's when I saw him. I specifically remember everyone knowing who he was. Will is what they call him. I remember getting excited to meet new people and be a part of a new community. Everyone was really nice going into the church. A guy at the door walking in gave us a pamphlet of meal times and services offered. I followed Mish to one of the back pews and I slid in behind her. The church was pretty, different colors, and there was a choir singing in a low and almost quiet tone as people around us are taking their seats. I kind of froze when the guy I saw come in, Will, he sat next to me. I looked at Mish, and then I quickly noticed his gold watch. It could have been fake, but it almost looked like a Rolex. He was an older black gentleman, talked real smooth when he introduced himself with his hand out. I was shocked that he wanted to shake my hand. No one in my life does that. I shook his hand, and they were creamy like he takes very good care of them, and obviously does not work a physically demanding job. He was nice dressed and had this pimp hat on like a fedora, and it had a feather in it. His cologne was strong but smelled good like a man. He was handsome and smooth. He was also very confident. And sitting through this sermon, I found it hard to pay attention to the preacher. I remember looking at his clean, shiny black leather shoes, and the socks were black and thick. And when the service was finally over, people started heading to the dining area. I just followed Mish through, and we got our food. She picked an empty space to eat in one of the end of the long tables, full of chairs. And not even 5 minutes, not paying attention to our surroundings, just eating. Will came over and sat 3 seats away from me. He looked at Mish and said, "Do you mind?" I don't know why I didn't see the red flags. Of course, I see them now, but looking back, I was so clueless. He hardly said a word the whole time that we were eating, and when he was done, he got up, threw his stuff away, and I assumed he left. Mish and I decided to go home, play some cards, and go to a clothes bank she knew about. We were walking home and talking when he pulled up next to us. He rolled down his window and asked if we needed a ride home, but he was looking at me with a deep stare, and I looked back at Mish and she refused. Smart girl. But I went with him. Dumb girl. I think I was more curious than anything. I had to know how he made that kind of money, and I remember wanting that. We drove around till my curfew, and we just talked. I don't know what it was. I think we had a lot in common, and we related a lot. He asked me how I ended up at this shelter, and just asking questions, so I told him. I don't know what it was, and I'm not sure if I trusted him, but I told him about my past anyway, how I sold my body for drugs, and how horrible it was, and I even said that I was glad that I didn't do it anymore. He didn't say much about it, and we agreed that we would continue our talk the next day, and he would help me put in a couple applications, and he had some errands too. I woke up the next morning to a text from Will that said, "What if you made that kind of money, but spent it on yourself, not drugs, and everything you make will go to you building your life? Just think about it." I thought about it. I'm not gonna say why I agreed, and went with the idea that this would work and I could actually get my life together and get my kids back. $200 a half hour. I could be free. I chose to go with him, and at that time, I think he thought that I wanted to be with him. But really, I just wanted a way out of the situation I was in. I hated that stinky, loud shelter and I wanted out. He got a room at a motel, and we dropped off my stuff, and he told me that I needed some new clothes. He did tell me that he was just fired from a trucking company. He was a truck driver, and he was currently trying to find another job as far as I knew. He took me shopping and he got me a few new outfits. More or less outfits to take pictures in to bring the money. I knew what I was getting into, and I was preparing my mind to handle everything that was about to happen. Will did tell me that if I went with him, I had to stay clean and have a clear mind to make money and be smart. Looking back at how manipulative he was and made me believe that I would do this to make my life better. I started doing this a few times before I got addicted so I could make rent or bills, so I knew I could mentally do it, but I was still unsure about where this was gonna go. We get back to the hotel and I do my thing. I take my pictures and post them, and it didn't take long before I started to get calls. I did make some money, and I kept every penny, and Will took me shopping. I remember the shoes I bought. They were black and gold baby fats. Oh, I love those shoes. I got like 6 or 7 cute outfits, some makeup and hair dye, and I remember I came to the shelter with nothing, so being able to get all of this stuff made me feel so good. I was confident in myself and hopeful that I could get to a place and start a new life within a few weeks, if days like that repeated itself. Remembering how things went, I am starting to think that this was part of his game, making girls think that they can do it and keep all the money and then just trap them and make them need you. It's sick. He tricked me. He made me think that I could finally live a clean life. Yeah, I was escorting, but I treated it like a job. I bought another phone so I had a new number, and I used the older phone for work, and it turned off at like 5 p.m. I thought wrong. I later that day went back over to the shelter and grabbed the one shirt that I had and some personal things, and I left with Will. That night was cool. He was super chill, and we talked in separate beds. We got a 2-bed and he didn't act like he had any interest in me. That which I was actually happy about, because I didn't want to be with anyone. I needed a break from my emotional attachment. After Ty left me, I felt like I wouldn't trust anyone like that in a long time, so I was happy that I was comfy in bed, watching TV, freshly showered, with money in my pocket, and I had the best night's sleep. And I woke up to breakfast and time to get up and get myself together. He got up early, went and got us breakfast and coffee. He ate with me and then left. He said that he will be back in a couple hours to take my time and to do what I gotta do. So I did just that, and while he was gone, I dyed my hair, took a hair, and the works, and not long after I was done and waited for him, the door opens and a female walks in. She's pale and has a beautiful face, long pretty blonde hair that ran down her shoulders. She was real petite, way too skinny, and a size B chest, pretty big blue eyes that had dark circles under them, and it looked like she had been crying, and she was carrying a black trash bag that contained all of her possessions. Will walked in behind her and introduced her as Anna, and that she needs some help too. He instructed me to get her together, get her pretty, and get some pictures and post them. He then told her to go on and take a shower, and then asked to talk to me outside. We went outside the door, and as I was shutting it, his voice got real stern and said, "I see you have not made any money yet. Why the hell is that?" I tried to explain that Sundays were the slowest days and that I would be lucky to make any money today. But before I could finish, he cut me off and said, "I don't give a damn. You need to make some money. What do you think? This hotel pays for itself? I will pay for it tonight, but for now, you pay half and half of all expenses. Now, Go make some money." I couldn't even believe he was talking like this. I never seen him so mad, and his voice scared the hell out of me. I looked at him when he cut me off, and I could see him get angry. His eyes got wide and the white just disappeared and they became all black. I was scared, but I did what he said. He then left me alone with her, while he went out and got food and whatever he did. While Anna got out of the shower, and her skin was more exposed as she walked out of the bathroom in a small towel. I knew she was addicted to IV use. I assumed heroin, and she confirmed it after I asked her if it was going to be a problem to not do drugs because that was his rule for me. Why wouldn't it be a rule for the other girls? After my kid's father passed away from an overdose, I didn't like to surround myself with girls I knew I could get close to. I try to help, and something happens, so I cut all of that out. And when she told me, I was like, "Okay, no, girl, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to make some calls because you can't stay here." At that point, I didn't even care what the hell Will has to say. I don't want her here, period. And as soon as he came through the door, I stopped him and I took him outside. I just told him that I didn't think I could work with her. I didn't want to be around a heroin addict or any kind of addict at that matter. He did make her pack her bathroom and clothes up and took her home. I think he was trying to please me for some reason. Will and I then took a ride to Main Street where all the girls walk and work. It was so weird. Remember how I said he knew everyone at church? He knew all those girls, business owners, police officers, and other men who drove drug dealer cars. I don't know why. I didn't just run then. I will never know. About an hour or two of driving around, talking to a bunch of different girls, this random-ass girl jumps in the car. It was crazy. They had known each other for years, I guess, and she had been looking for him and wanted to make some money. She was quite a bit older than me, but still really pretty, like beautiful. She had long, thick, curly jet black hair. I didn't really get a look at her until we got back to the hotel. Will told me that he wanted to get a few girls together and make some big money. I was always going to be number one, and I will never post with another female because I am the number one. He told me that I was important and we were building our own family. Amy was tall and thick, but she was gorgeous. Big blue eyes, pretty skin, small waist with a big round butt, and she was a straight-up bitch. She took benzos and she was prescribed to them, I guess, so he allowed it. It wasn't long before I couldn't help but watch her. She was popular, and then like at night, she would be falling out and nodding off. It drove me crazy. I think I even started a fight with Will about it once. I didn't think it was fair, honestly. Like, that bitch can get high, but I can't? Hell no. What Will would do was during the day, he would leave me at the hotel to make money, and he took Amy to the street and worked her. Well, it wasn't 2 days before they came home with another girl. A young one, 18, her choice, no family. I only know what they tell me. And her name was Amanda. She was short like me and a little chunky, which was okay. Guys like chunky too. She had blonde long hair and a cute face. She was sweet and didn't say much, and I tried to get to know her a little better, but she wasn't around for long. I posted her with Amy, and she didn't get much of a feedback. More people were calling for Amy, and Amanda stayed with us for a few days before she decided that she wanted to go home. Will, Amy, and I didn't stay at the hotel for long, and we ended up deep into the city, the farthest away from my hometown. Bigger room and a little nicer hotel with a view for the whole city. It had a little shitty microwave, and a drive-up entrance to your room. Will and Amy brought home 2 girls that night. I don't remember them much because I wasn't involved with them much. I posted them, and the next few days we made money. Every time a girl would make money, they would give it to Will because he had them believe that he was saving it for them and getting them anything they wanted. I continued to make money on my own, and I also gave him my money. I got suspicious, and I will never forget the moment I knew that I was not safe. I was outside smoking a cigarette. I wasn't out there long, but when I came back into the room, Will had all 3 girls posing on the bed as he was coaching them on how to pose and taking snaps of them. I didn't say a word and closed the door slowly. I don't know why I felt the way I did, but it just didn't feel right. I don't know if he heard me open and close the door, but I heard him yell my name and said he needed me. He handed me his phone and told me to post the pictures. When I got onto the website and tried to post the pictures, it now wanted money instead of posting ads for free. Will unhappily ran to wherever and put money on a card. When I tried to put the card in, it wouldn't accept it and said it wanted Bitcoin. I informed Will and even showed him the page that it wasn't going to post. He got furious and yelled at me. He turned and walked out of the room. I looked at everyone else and tried to apologize for his actions and to stay calm and that it will be okay. He came right back in with a gun in his hand. I didn't even know he owned a gun. He hit me in the face with it and said that I needed to find somewhere to post the ad and do it or I am done, and then he left. I don't know if he realized he did that in front of 3 other girls, and I didn't know what or I'm done meant either. I was freaking terrified, and that's when I knew that I had to find a way to escape. I learned real quick that I wasn't able to just leave anytime I wanted anymore. After Amy got involved, Will changed. He started talking about taking us girls to New York and making big money and travel and go here and there, and that alone scared the hell out of me. I wanted to build a life to get my kids back, not to leave state to trick and maybe get killed or abandoned. No, none of that. I got fearful for my life when he hit me with a gun. I have been hit before, punched like a man, but I have never been hit with a gun. That night, I had a couple dates set up, and Will knew he had to take the girls and leave. And I decided to make my plan to get away. The first date, I made $200 and I put $50 in my purse, and then put $50 in a pocket in a bra hidden away, and I left the rest on the table. The second date, I made $150, put half hidden away, and the rest on the table. Will came in the door not long after I was finished and grabbed the money off the table. My purse was sitting right there, and I didn't see him do it, but he took the money out of my purse and said that he had something to do and left again. That was when I made my escape. I made 100 calls before I finally reached someone who was willing to help me. He had a friend come and pick me up and bring me to his house. And I will never forget the feeling that I had when I was running out to the car with a trash bag full of stuff that I have collected in the past 3 weeks. I was scared to death that he would come pulling up and see me. That feeling didn't leave me until we hit the highway. I wanted to tell this story because I have never been able to get through telling it. I couldn't help to think where I would be if I stayed, and if I would even be alive. So Will, let's never meet again. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.